Morning. How are we doing today? You guys, I'm excited to be here. When I first got into strength and conditioning, this was the very first conference that I ever attended. And, I think I sat in the audience, and I think I talked to maybe one person the entire time I was there. So, is there anybody that's here for the first time? First time attending this conference? That's great. Don't let that be you, all right? Please make sure you introduce yourself to as many people as possible. Come shake my hand. I'd love to meet you, because I think this business is so important to network, and we're going to get a little bit into all that. Scott asked me to speak a little bit on the things that I've learned since college, things that you really need to know, but they didn't teach you in college, and so I was going to get up here and I was just going to put up one slide and I was going to say everything, and I was going to drop the mic Eddie Murphy style and then walk off, but I decided not to do that, but there's a lot to that, and I think right now we're in a little bit of a rut with our young coaches that, I got my degree, I got my certification, I'm ready to go. And in a lot of respects you are. But there's so much of this job that is mentorship-based or apprenticeship-based that you have to make sure you spend the time to learn how to handle all the other things. And so what I decided to do was, went too far, was talk a little bit about my journey, to be very transparent. I'm hoping this is, mostly strength coaches, because it's probably more applicable to strength coaches. But the reality is that, if you're a small business owner or things along those lines, it's applicable to you as well. So I'm going to be completely transparent with my journey, and I want to talk about 10 things that I've learned, 10 things that have kind of stood out to me throughout my career that have equaled, if put together, success. And so success to me is as simple as T plus M plus E. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go. So really quickly, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on my journey, and they talked about it a little bit, but I think it's important so you kind of get why I made some of the moves that I did. I started off at a little small school called Ottawa University. How many people have heard of Ottawa University? Anybody? It's a little NAIA school in Kansas, okay? No strength coach, no real organized weight program. We worked out in the rec center, but it's produced about 5 different strength coaches out there right now, which has been phenomenal from this little small school of about 900 students on campus. Played football there and then stayed on. I coached for a year for a guy named Chris Creighton my senior year. Chris came in as a 26-year-old head football coach. I was a 21-year-old senior. We went 1-8 my junior year, went 9-1 my senior year. Okay? While I was coaching, after I played, I took an internship with the Kansas City Royals. This was a spot where I came to this conference right here. A guy named Kevin Barr hired me. I reached out to him throughout college. I was from Kansas City, and he was the head strength coach for the Kansas City Royals, and basically begging for an opportunity because I couldn't get a sniff because I was at a small school. I had nobody kind of advocating for me. Kevin hires me, takes the job with the Cincinnati Reds, leaves. A guy named Tim Maxey comes in. We find out in passing that we're going to be at this conference together. So that was the one person I talked to that entire conference. He hands me a faxed scans or copies of the workout and says, show up on Monday, you're working out the Royals. I have to go work out X, Y, and Z players that are all over the country. So I show up to work on Monday, no experience, no real guidance, don't know the players, no relationship, and I've got Jermaine Dye, Mike Sweeney, Johnny Damon, Carlos Beltran, all sitting there looking at me with wide eyes saying, who's this guy? So for the Kansas City Royals, my passion was football. Always was. So I got an internship. I wrote a million letters. Tampa Bay Bucks guy calls me up and offers me an internship after a long process that we'll talk about. I leave a job offer from the Kansas City Royals as a AAA guy making pretty good money to be the unpaid intern for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All right? I go to Tampa Bay. I work up from an internship to a part-time assistant. I get an opportunity as a 22-year-old strength coach to go be the head strength coach in NFL Europe with the Berlin Thunder. So I go over to Europe, leave my wife for 4 months, a hard thing to do when you've been married about 4 months. And we go over to Europe and get a great experience there in Berlin. While I'm in Berlin, I get a call from a strength coach that we'll talk about throughout, saying that there's a job at Tampa, Florida with the South Florida Bulls. I was living in Tampa because I was working for the Bucks, so it seemed like a pretty good opportunity, but they were a 1AA startup program in year 2 of existence. You know, nobody had heard of them. Nobody knew anything about them. You know, the weight room was 2,000 square feet. We had green walls floor to ceiling, and where there had been holes put in the wall, they had taken green TheraBand and stapled it so that it didn't show up. Okay, so that's the program we took over. South Florida, I was there 11 years, and we took it from, you know, non-existence basically to a number 2 ranking and 6 bowls and the whole deal. In a weight room, initially for at least the first 7 years, that was 2 platforms and less than 2,000 square feet. We have a coaching change, you know, because of an incident with our head coach. So we get a new head coach, and at the end of the day, it was a situation where I wasn't his guy, he wasn't my guy, you know. So during that time, I had worked with special operations, consulted with different groups. MacDill's Air Force Base, Special Operations Command is in Tampa, Florida. My dad was a Navy man. And so it was a situation where I was, you know, I was presented an opportunity to work with their Thor 3 program, and I took it. It was a great opportunity, but while I was there, I wasn't doing a whole lot of coaching, which is my passion. You know, I was going and flying all over the world to meet with a nutritionist here and a sports scientist here and a strength coach here, and coming up with a great program for the guys, but I wasn't training. And I didn't like that. Tennessee calls, offers me a 1-year deal with triple the money, turn them down. Offered me a 2-year deal with triple the money, I turned them down. I did a 3-year deal, I couldn't turn them down, you know? So I decided to take Tennessee because it was SEC football and it was a passion and something that I'd worked for a long time. I get to Tennessee, there 2 years came in year 2 of Derek's tenure. And you know, there's a lot of issues, a lot of things that we fixed up internally, but wasn't showing up on the field. And so all of a sudden, find myself out of a job because we bring in a new football coach, and now any more football coaches get to bring in their guys, regardless of the job you do. From there, I decided to go work for the Cincinnati Bengals. I knew Coach Lewis from different pro days and things along those lines. Great guy, gives me an opportunity, kind of created a job. Created an opportunity. I go there, and then just recently, as evident by the E on my chest here, I took a job with my same college football coach at Ottawa that came in as a 26-year-old head football coach. Well, I'm a 21-year-old senior, and we go from 1-8 to 9-1. He gets his first opportunity at Division I at Eastern, and it was a great opportunity. It was one thing I couldn't pass up to go work with him. The guy's a winner. So that's my journey kind of as a whole. I want to tell you that because, you know, it kind of leads in throughout these 10 things, okay? So now, you see on the left-hand side, there's 2 pictures here. It's important for you to know that sacrificing isn't something that you just do initially in your career to get advancement. It's something that you have to do throughout your career if you're going to be in this profession, okay? So the picture on the left is when I got back from NFL Europe. NFL Europe was a seasonal position. I got back, looked down at my bank account. We got $9 in my banking account, all right? I just got done working, you know, with million-dollar athletes, both at the Kansas City Royals, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Felt pretty good about myself. Go to NFL Europe. I'm a 22-year-old head strength coach, feeling really good about myself. To come home, I got $9. I'm looking at wife that I just left for 4 months, been married for 8 months, and saying this is what we have to live off of for the week. Not an easy thing to do. Some of y'all can relate to that, I'm sure. So I had to go to one of those labor-ready places. You guys know those places? You know, you got to go stand in line. They go pick you out of a group. Then you ride in the back of a truck with about 15 people. You go out to the job site. You do the job. and then you come back, and they give you cash, and it's usually like, you have to pay the guy that drove you out there. You got to pay for the gas, the whole deal. You walk out with about $50 maybe. That day, I worked in a trash incinerator, okay? So I had to go in the incinerator where if they would have shut that little top and turned it on, I'm cooked. And I had to scrape trash off the inside of the trash incinerator for that time, for that 8 hours. Did it all 8 hours. So I came home and told my wife to take a picture because I wasn't ever going to do that again. But it's important you understand that sacrifice. Likewise, the picture on the right, that's my apartment here in Cincinnati. Okay, I have a wife and 4 kids. We adopted 3 kids from the Ukraine, took another kid in from Honduras, had the United Nations in my house, had to leave my family for the last 8 months for continued advancement in the profession. Had to make a sacrifice again. So there I am living like a serial killer with a mattress on the floor, a table and chairs for my TV there. I got the little desk. Some of y'all watch those little podcasts I do. I do it right there. Looks terrible, and but that's what I've been living out of for the last 8 months. So it's a continuous sacrifice. Probably the most common and the biggest sacrifice that you make in this profession is to do an internship, a mentorship. Early on in your career, that's usually typically the sacrifice that you make. And it's so important because all those things that you have to learn as a strength coach on how to interact with athletes and how to program and how to manage and all this, you can't learn that any other way but by doing it. And so the benefits of having a good mentor, just like with these business and life skills. Okay, so I'm 17 years into this profession with pretty decent success in the profession, but yet I'm still learning. I get a chance to go work with Chip Morton and Jeff Friday. And I wasn't learning necessarily just the X's and O's of strength and conditioning, although I learned plenty of that. I learned some great just family life skills from 2 men that are great fathers and great husbands and great strength coaches. And I was learning as much about the family stuff and how to interact and manage this profession as a man as I was being a strength coach. Perspective and vision. Obviously, they give you great perspective and vision. I kind of became, since being fired at Tennessee, when I got fired at Tennessee, I've kind of been the go-to guy when everybody gets fired now. Everybody calls me up for some reason. Hey, how did you handle this? What'd you do? And I love it because I have great perspective and vision. I was pretty spoiled at South Florida. I thought getting into that and being there for 11 years, my first real job, I didn't really understand all these things that could happen. So I went through it and went through all the stages of grief, and moved on. So I was able to provide some perspective and vision for that. Isolation, that's typical. It's especially typical of guys that are and gals that are in small strength coach jobs where maybe you're the only person for the university. You feel isolated, and you feel like you're hindered because of that. Wisdom from past experiences, improved performance, talent development, a sounding board, and learn how to be a good mentor yourself. There's a lot of former interns that are in the audience today, and I'll tell you, I get more joy out of seeing their success than I do, winning games a lot of times. I'm a pretty competitive guy, but it really means a lot to me to see them come in as young strength coaches and then flourish, and we've been able to produce quite a few. So the second thing, sometimes you got to learn. Sometimes it's not what you know, but who you know. So when I was at Ottawa and coaching and working for the Royals, I sent out probably 360 some odd letters to different strength coaches. Now this is before really email and all the tools that we have available to us now. So they were actually letters, and I was an idiot and actually tried to make each one personalized, So I spent a lot of time and spent a lot of money on postage at a time when, that wasn't cheap now to send those letters out. And I got, I thought it was cool to get the 50 rejection letters that I got with the logos and all that. And I had a little wall. I had a wall that was rejection wall, and that motivated me, But one of the calls that I made, and one of the letters I got back was from Rod Cole at K-State. K-State was up the road. about 3 hours up the road, and so I decided to go visit him. And so, I'm just graduating. I've got my suit on. I'm driving my little Toyota Corolla up to Manhattan, Kansas, and I'm living out of it basically. And I get there and I have a great meeting. I go 5 pages of site visit notes that I have and questions to ask Rod. And to Rod's credit, he sat there and he answered every one of them. He spent probably close to 4 hours with me. He gets in my little Toyota Corolla with all my stuff in it, and we drive over to the indoor and didn't say one word about me looking like a bum living out of my car almost. Same guy that 2 years later I'm staying in touch with because I go to the Royals in Tampa Bay and all these things. Same guy that tracks my number down while I'm in Europe. If you asked me to call Europe right now, I couldn't tell you. There's no way I could even tell you how to even possibly do that. Tracks my number down really before internet and all that, and calls me and tells me about a job opportunity at South Florida with a former defensive coordinator at K-State that's the first head coach at South Florida, Jim Leavitt. Calls me and tells me about it and sets me up. Sets me up for my first job off one site visit, 2 years later. A second call I made was to another coach in the Big 12 who actually graduated from Ottawa, who played football at Ottawa, who went to a rival high school of mine, majored in the exact same 2 things, biology and exercise science, that I did. And I call him up, and he blows me off a little bit, kind of gives me 5 minutes, tells me that there's a kinesiology program. A&M at the time, or the program at the time was I think first or second in the league, or in the Big 12. I think they finished number 1 or 2 in the country that year. And I call him up, and he tells me basically there's a kinesiology program with an emphasis in strength and conditioning, and it was a great football program. And I was like, I'm in. You're a former Ottawa guy. You're going to help me out. It's going to be a great opportunity. So I set up a meeting with the campus rec, get a GA through them. I'm going down there to meet with them. I call them up again. I'm saying, hey, look, I'm coming down there to be a GA in the rec center. All I want to do is volunteer. Call him 4 months out, blows me off, doesn't call me back. Call him 3 months out, no call. 2 months out, no call. Month out, week out. Every day that I'm there, no call. I see this guy later on in my career at a conference. I'm sitting there, and I'm a head strength coach at South Florida, and he comes up, and we ran a pretty good internship program at South Florida. And I got my intern manual. We're talking with a couple other coaches, and he comes up and he asks me, because part of that, one of the lectures that I give him was on resume building, and I have my resume there as an example. He sees Ottawa University. He says, oh, man, I wish I would have known you were at Ottawa University. I would have helped you. I'm sitting here going, you got to be kidding me, right? And then turns around and asks me for a copy of my intern manual because he thought it was good and he wanted to turn around and use some of it for his own program, So you never know. It taught me an important lesson. You never know when you're going to see someone down the line and how they might be able to assist you. So I spend a lot of time with our interns. I spend a lot of time with young coaches because you never know. I mean, that person may hire you 20 years down the road. It's not totally impossible. I've hired people that were my bosses before. It's a lot easier now than it was for me to connect with coaches, but building meaningful coaching relationships is critical. So you got to take the time to do that, and you got to have a plan. And so, things for building meaningful relationships, first you got to know yourself and your goals. You got to be able to articulate them clearly. That's the elevator pitch. I did an article a year ago, I think about this time actually, about your elevator pitch. In these settings right here, you got 5 minutes with a coach. You got to leave an impression somehow, some way. Elevator pitch is basically that presentation that you give to try to make a sale. And it's the length of an elevator ride. You got to be able to articulate your goals and your desires in that time and make them want to know a little bit more about you. You got to listen and help others get their goals. It's the easiest way to get what you want. Help other people get what they want. I promise you, they're going to try to help you get what you want. You got to seek feedback and opinions and consultation and collaboration. You got to keep track of who you know and continually do that. Coach Cole, I kept track with throughout my entire career. Still do. Make sure I just drop him a line. Hey, good luck this season. I'm at Eastern Michigan now. Let me know if I can ever help you. You got to define the type of relationship you want to have with your network. You don't want to expect any one person to play every role. Is another key element. Every person can't do everything. They're not going to be just always the person that's going to get you the job, or be the person you go from a programming standpoint, or family advice, or relationship advice, or anything along those lines. And the last one here, and probably most important, because when you do pour yourself into people, if you don't get that thank you in return, it's a little jab. It's a little jab. I spend a lot of time working with coaches. I don't always get that thank you, I'll be honest with you. And all these 10 things that we're going to kind of discuss today, they're things that may seem common sense, but the reality is that I've dealt with a lot of coaches, I've hired a lot of coaches, I've been around a lot of coaches, and this common sense stuff isn't being applied. It's not being applied. So the third thing that I learned that was probably one of the most important things is you got to learn to ask the right questions. So the guy you see in the picture there is Mark Asanovich. He's the guy that was the head strength coach at Tampa Bay when I went and worked for him. And again, here I am. I'm working with the Royals. I'm coaching. I feel pretty good about myself. I got my degree. I got my CSCS. I'm ready to go. He calls me up. And you probably heard this story. He calls me up and he says, Ronnie, you want to be a strength coach, right? I said, yes, sir, more than anything my whole life. That's what I want to do with my life. He goes, well, define strength. And as strength coaches and in the audience right now, just do that for a second. Take a moment and sit back and say, define strength. And for me, as a young strength coach coming right out of college, that was extremely hard for me to do. I'm pretty sure I gave him the power definition. He clicks over, because he got a phone call. I've got every book and notebook and everything that I got prepared for my interview, and I'm flipping through every one of them as fast as I can to try to find a definition for strength. But it taught me an important lesson in my career. It taught me an important lesson that I need to define every single thing that goes in my program, and I need to be able to communicate that to my athletes. So I still do that to this day. If it goes in my program, I can tell you exactly why it's there and what it means. That same guy I'm working for at Tampa, and we would bring coaches in we did kind of assembly line workouts. I grew up, 2 blocks over from Istvan Javorek, training Olympic lifting my whole life. It's all I ever really knew. I go down to Tampa Bay. It's a high-intensity program and almost to the extreme high intensity. Okay, so it's totally fish out of water. And as a young coach, totally bought in hook, line, and sinker. Totally abandoned Olympic lifting and periodization, went completely high intensity and was probably its biggest advocate for about 6 months there. So we bring these coaches in for these assembly line workouts, and we're going through, and there's a strength coach from Virginia that was down helping us out because it's great experience, and you all should do it if you get an opportunity. Go see some site visits and do many internships and things along those lines. But he comes down, and he's an Olympic lifting guy. And I'm going to show this guy, right? I'm going to go out there, and we're going to have this big debate, and he's going to think I'm the coolest thing since sliced bread. And so we go out there, and we get in this debate, and this guy has been coaching 15 years. He eats me up, tears me up, right? I mean, it just makes me look like a fool. And I'm getting pissed now, all right, because I'm a competitive guy, right? Mark hears me start escalating, grabs us both and puts us in the office, pulls up his little PowerPoint and goes through it. And he has this guy fumbling like a buffoon in about 10 minutes, and I'm in the background like a cheerleader going, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he gets up, he walks out. This guy's mad himself, walks out, leaves. I walk out, I'm ready to high five the rest of the interns and the rest of the staff, and we just got this guy, right? He sits me back down, he tells me, okay, give me that same argument back. And then he turned around and he argued Olympic lifting and periodization and tore me up again with the same argument that we just went through. And so it taught me another great lesson, that you can't be closed-minded. You can't be closed-minded. Even though he chose for his program, his profession, to be a high-intensity guy, that's what works for him. Olympic lifting and periodization or CrossFit or all these different disciplines may work for somebody else. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's wrong. You got to find what's right for you and your athlete specifically. And if you're closed-minded and you have a coaching change or something along those lines, you're going to find yourself in a bad situation. And so it doesn't mean you don't have principles and values and those types of things. You just got to decide, you got to define what those are. When he was walking out that office, the question he asked was, you must learn to ask the right questions. It's not what's the most you can do, it's what's the least you can do with the same results. So you got to learn to ask the right questions. So I've always gone throughout my career. I'm telling you right now, I've been in this profession for 17 years. I'm just now starting to learn how to ask the right questions as we go. Continued learning is such a powerful thing, and it's something that you have to do throughout your career. And I know, guys, that a lot of these things aren't in I put this together, just like everybody. I put it together about 2 o'clock in the morning last night. So I'll get you this. Email me at the end. My email's there. I'll email you, I promise you. All right? But continuing to learn is a powerful thing. You need to develop a deep curiosity for strength and conditioning. And not just strength and conditioning, but the other elements of strength and conditioning that you have to do, leadership and management and some of these other things that you have to do to be a great strength coach. You got to schedule time for it. You got to find a time in your day. What is that? That's, for me, that's a 20-minute commute every day, so I'm putting on a podcast, Mike Boyle's podcast or something along those lines. Or I'm listening to it while I'm doing my cardio, or I'm making sure that I read at least one article before I go to bed. I make sure I read at least one chapter in a book before I go to bed every night. What I try to do, and some of you probably heard me talk about this, I try to read one book a week. That's hard with what we do and the hours we do it. But I rotate. I go a strength and conditioning book, I go a leadership book, and then I go a family book because I want to be great in all those areas. So week 3 is the family, and I go back to strength and conditioning. I study unrelated fields. Big kick right now is the business field. I like it a lot because it's teaching me how to be a better and more effective manager. You got to listen. You got to find career coach, mentor, and a buddy. You got to read. And you got to put yourself in situations where you're forced to learn. That's probably the most hard thing. When I went to Cincinnati, I'd been a head strength coach for 15 years, 16 years. All of a sudden, I found myself as an assistant. And part of the reason why I'm at Eastern, to be honest with you, is because I'm not an assistant strength coach. It's just not who I am. But it was good for me because it put me in challenging situations. When we went out there and we said, how are we going to teach the power clean today? I had my way. They had their way. I had to sit there and go, you know what? I got to really remember why I do what I do. I've just been doing it this way for so long. I got to really remember why I do what I do. And I got to be able to articulate that with somebody that's got their own way and the way they've been doing things. The fourth one here, you can and you will be fired. It's going to happen. This is something that was very hard for me. I did not know this. I was sheltered in South Florida there 11 years. I didn't really realize that could happen. I built that program from scratch, been strength coach of the year, gone to 6 straight bowl games, gone to number 2 ranking, all these things. But yet, when we had a coaching change, I sit down with the AD. Well, that football coach, they could probably bring in whoever they want. We don't know. We're not sure yet. And that didn't really sit well with me. It still doesn't sit well with me, But it was something that was a jab to the psyche. What you don't account for when you get into this business is you don't account for the fact that the toll it's going to take on you emotionally. We're all pretty much type A personalities. Most everybody in this room is probably a type A personality. When you get a jab to your pride, it's not usually kind of introverted, kind of sit back and kind of take it. It's usually extroverted, I want to punch you in the face. That's how I am. So when I get that jab and I get fired, I want to punch somebody in the face. That was not easy for me. You don't account for the fact that you're probably going to have a family. When I was a 20-year-old first-time strength coach, 21-year-old first-time strength coach, I didn't think about having 4 kids like I do now. I didn't think about a wife. I didn't think about having to pick them up and move them to schools when they're going into high school or leaving friends and sports and all those types of things. I didn't think about that. Didn't think about having to sell a house. You got to, as soon as you decide that you're going to be a strength coach, you got to start planning as if you're not going to be one. What are you going to do then? So there's 2 books I want to recommend. There's Dave Ramsey. He's got a couple. Total Money Makeover. He's got Financial Peace University. Very, very blunt guy. Got a chance to meet him, got a chance to know him. I read all his books, and then all of a sudden I go to Tennessee, and he's on the Tennessee Board of Directors. And so he comes and speaks to our team, and I'm like, I go up to him, I'm saying, I mean, this is great to meet you. You've been such a help. He's like, no, it's great to meet you. I've heard great things about you. That was pretty cool, man. That was pretty cool. But this guy just has a great way about him, but he talks about the importance of having an emergency fund. And in our profession, having an emergency fund is even more important. He tells you you should put away 4 to 6 months of living expenses. In our profession, you should really try to put away 12 months of living expenses because job cycles are year to year. There's another book called Multiple Streams of Income. I think that's Robert Greene, I believe. But it talks about plugging leaks, and all the different things that ways that you can save money. So those Netflix, subscriptions that you have, that you don't use, or that, that cable bill once a month. Well, not once a month. I don't want to lie to you. Probably once every 3 months, I call my cable company telling them I'm leaving and give me a better deal. And they always do. They always do. I call my insurance company every 6 months. Hey, I had no tickets, no accidents, give me a better deal. And they usually do. And so finding ways to plug leaks of where money's going out, you're not going to make so much money. It's hard, it's not like you can work another job because you're working a 16-hour day as it is. But finding ways to keep money in is another great. Your retirement as a young strength coach, you don't really think about your retirement a lot. But the employee matching and things along those lines is ridiculous with a lot of these universities. I mean, it's throwing away money in a lot of situations. So, you're going to face job loss if you're in this profession long enough. So some things you got to do. You got to revisit your budget consistently. You got to always kind of step back, take a moment and look at it and just know where money's going and how much money that is. I tell you, out of all the conversations I've had with these strength coaches that are getting fired, I'm getting hundreds of calls. I'm telling you, it's sad. But when I ask them, what do they spend? What's their budget? What do they, how many months do they have before they have to find another job? Almost to a man, none of them can tell you. It's either my wife handles that, or my husband handles that, or I have absolutely no clue. I guess I got to go look at that. You got to pad your emergency fund, at least 6 to 8 months. Rent, mortgage, groceries, insurance, gas, unexpected expenses, all those things. You got to supplement your income. There's, with the internet and all these things. I mean, there's all these internet gurus now, and it's great. And I'm on the internet, and all those types of things. And I don't try to be a guru. I really don't. I try to be a guy that just provides some information. But there's a lot of ways. There's people out there that will pay you $5, $10, $25 to write an article. Well, you should be researching and continuing learning anyway. So why not go get an extra $25 and get a little bit of exposure and things along those lines? Why not do that? It's a great opportunity there. It's some freelance work, camps and clinics and all those types of things. You got to get out of debt. Pay your high interest to low interest. You got to practice living off one income. This is something that we did, when things weren't looking very good. We just we said, okay, we're going to live off my wife's income and see how we do it. And it gave us a pretty good snapshot of what we need to do for the next 6, 7, 8 months if we had to. Don't forget about retirement. Have a plan for the money, move to an IRA, and then obviously continuous networking is always paramount as you try to go and find your next position. So the fifth thing that kind of stood out to me, this was probably one of the things that I struggled with the most, even though it's what I'm all about, is that athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Tommy Moffitt, I was talking to Tommy the other day, and one of the coaches, the high school coach he worked for, he said that 99.9% of the athletes that you're going to work with don't love the weight room as much as you do. They don't care about what you do as much. And so that's kind of hard for that type A personality to turn around and say, what do you mean squat's not everything? What do you mean that power clean's not everything? Get the hell out of the weight room. Are you crazy? How dare you say that's a sin? Go repent. But they don't care about it as much. They love playing the game. So again, as a 20-year-old, and I talked about extrovert and introvert. to be honest with you, I'm pretty much an introverted guy. I've got to, I don't like being out in front of people that much, but, as a strength coach, I have to be. So I do it, and I'm good at it, but I have to go recharge. So, I don't, I go away, and I go in a little room, and I got to recharge for a minute. But that was, for me to do that, it was hard to form those relationships that I needed to form with the athletes. And so I really had to challenge myself. So I was the guy that made all the mistakes. In NFL Europe, a guy that went to Stanford, played in the NFL, was an allocation player for us. Great guy, had a great relationship with him. We're sitting there trading books. I'm reading, I think When Pride Still Mattered was a book that he lent me, and I lent him a book. I can't remember what it was. And so we had a great relationship. Well, that joker goes and gets on the front seat of the bus where I usually sit, and I'm taking roll, and I get on, and he's in the front seat, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing in the front seat? That's my seat. And we go to get into a fist fight over a dang seat on a bus in Berlin, Germany. I'm the guy that throws plates. I'm all those things. I made all those mistakes. And then our team chaplain, who I love dearly, came to me and he challenged me to be what I said I was going to be when I got in this profession. I said I was going to be in this profession to make an impact on young people's lives. I said I was in this business to make the same impact that this the coaches had on me, being in a single parent home, had the same impact that had on me, be that for somebody else. And so he really challenged me on that. And it was one of those things that I had to make a mental shift, and I didn't make it right at first, I promise you. I didn't grow up in I didn't grow up with a dad at home. My dad was a SEAL. He was post-traumatic stress disorder, alcoholic, all those things, and so coaches kind of filled that void. I grew up harder. We moved almost probably every 6 months. I grew up harder than a lot of the hardest athletes that we deal with, So it was almost more challenging to me when working with those guys that, look, you're not a product, or you're not a victim of your circumstance. You can do whatever you want with your life. And so I almost held those guys to a harder challenge. But I had to find ways in my career to give them those experiences that I had. And what I learned was they weren't all in the weight room. What I learned, they weren't all in the weight room. They weren't just in those 2 hours. All those relationships and those experiences that I had, a lot of them were off-site workouts, climbing mountains with Chris Creighton before a visit, or going rafting, or going doing this, that, and the other. And so I started finding ways within my program to be able to give them those experiences. So we did a lot of off-site workouts, special workouts, team buildings. I would find what interest players, and I'd find opportunity. We had a player at Tennessee was borderline mute. Nobody talked to him. Everybody said, "Don't worry about him. He's not going to be on our program." Wouldn't talk to anybody. I'm out there. I'm looking. He's fixing his car. I'm like, "Hey, you like cars?" When we're talking about his goals for the next period, you like cars? Oh yeah, I really like cars. And I think he grunted it. Oh yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I got a buddy that's a coach for, strength coach for Hendricks Motorsports. Let's go over there sometime. So long story short, we go in the car, 3 hours there, 3 hours back. He goes and he walks in. I'm cool up the flash and all that. He walks back to the engine room and starts talking to these NASCAR mechanics. He's an African-American, dreads coming down, and he's talking about manifolds and engines and all, and they're sitting there going, their jaws hitting the ground. And I'm telling you, it was like that, a completely different shift. But you must build strong, meaningful relationships, and you got to acknowledge them, very important. You got to value them, you got to respect them, you got to demonstrate fairness. You got to exhibit realness. I use now more so than ever. I use my own personal life experiences, because as I go through life, I told them my job is to help you become a better husband, a better father, a better citizen. And if I can help do that and model that through my own life, who better? Who deals with them more? Be open, honor, and have fun. We got to get kind of going here, guys. I'm a little long-winded. 6. You got to get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. To be a great leader, you got to be a great follower, first. And as a manager, I've made all the mistakes. I fired an assistant for not coming in during the hurricane. I did that. I ended up hiring him back that a little bit later, but I fired him first. I got in a shoving match with an assistant once. I've learned from those mistakes, but I've made all of them. But in hiring and being a manager, this is one of the things that you really struggle with as a head strength coach, because all of a sudden you didn't have to do these things. You just had to go out there and count reps before. But now you have to go manage people, and that's not easy, especially when they're type A personalities like you. So there's 7 C's that I kind of go by now when I'm looking for hiring people. A, they got to be competent. 2, they got to be capable. Can they do the job? Are they compatible with me? Probably most important. Could be a great strength coach, but if they're not compatible, no way. Are they committed? Everybody says they are, but are they truly? Do they have high character? Are they doing the things off the field? I tell them all the time that we have the athletes for 2 hours. They have 22 hours to mess up everything we just did. So if we're not dealing with them for those 22 hours, we're fighting a losing battle. Do they have great culture? Are they going to bring something unique there? And then obviously, do they understand the compensation piece? Do they understand what they're paying? So when I bring you in for this money, although I'm going to fight for you and all those types of things, I want to reward you for hard work and loyalty and all those things, the reality is that most of the time, the job pays what it pays. And I'll help you in other ways, and I'll help promote you and move you on and all those types of things, but the reality is that the job pays what it pays. 7th one was, learning to love what you hate. Nobody likes to be at the computer. I hate the desk. I hate paperwork. I hate doing maintenance duties. I hate putting things together. Medial tasks, I don't like those things, but they're all part of the job. And so as a young strength coach or strength coaches, you kind of had to find a way to embrace those. The 2 biggest ones being kind of maintenance and administrative. So what clicked for me as a strength coach was if I made that a learning experience. So when I was at Tampa, as an intern, I wrote down every tool we had in our toolbox. Every tool, I wrote it down. So that way, because I knew at some point I was going to be a head strength coach, so I was going to have a toolbox, and that was one less thing that I was going to have to worry about. Here's what I need. If it's not in there, go get it. From an administrative standpoint, fundraising and getting things is hard. So I would keep 3 lists. I'd kind of have like a hot list. That was what I would, head coaches, they always walk in, what should I be working on? Or what can we get for recruiting? And I'd have a hot list. I'd have it ready to go. Here's your 3 bids. This is exactly what it costs. This is how we pay for it. And it was in a binder. I'd have major purchases. This was stuff that we did with our annual budget. Kind of had that planned out for multiple years, had a big picture in mind. And then I had minor purchases, were things that, were team purchases. Everybody has discretionary funds. So if we need TRXs, hey, if every team buys a TRX, we have 12, 17, 21 TRXs for our program. I'd have those lists, and I had them all these ready to go. And because of that, we were able to do a lot of things in a small facility at South Florida with not a whole lot of money. My annual budget the year I left was $2,000. The year I left, even after all that success. So the takeaway is that you got to embrace the company mission. Doing the paperwork, doing the maintenance duty provides a safe facility and an organized facility. You got to do that. You got to embrace the company mission. You got to make each opportunity a learning task, a learning opportunity. So those things, I would find ways to say, when I become this, or when I do this, or when I'm at a big program like Tennessee, I'm ready for a facility design because I designed this little 2,000 square foot weight room. And then you got to systemize and delegate. So there's 2 programs. There's a program called ScreenFlow, and there's a program called Camtasia. Okay, Camtasia is for a PC. ScreenFlow is for a Mac. So what I do now, because I'm the guy that gives you a task, and when I give you a task, I tell you that I can do it better and faster than you. But I have to give it away, so here you go. And then a lot of times I'm the guy that's working on it simultaneously just to kind of compete with you and see, if I do it faster. And so I can yell at you. That's usually me. So what I found doing was all those little things like putting an attendance in or how to create a workout card or whatever it is. That's screen capture software to where I go and I do it once, and now there's a video that I just give to every intern and every staff member that walks in, and now they see exactly how I want. So now all I have to do is hold them accountable to doing it the way that I told them and showed them. So that's been a big deal. So you got to systematize. What are the steps? And then you delegate away because you can't do it all. I promise you. You can't do it all. Eighth one, had to learn to get a life, and this was hard for me, because my life was strength and conditioning for so long, but I adopted those 3 kids, the 4th just recently, and it was one of those deals where, you had to change. So I was a guy that didn't take a vacation for the first 7 years, not one vacation day for the first 7 years at South Florida. And so what happens when you do that, you're going to get divorced, or you're going to be an absent father or mother. You're not going to have any friends or hobbies. I have 0 hobbies. I'm starting to get a few more now because I'm really working in this area, but I have 0 hobbies. I only have very few friends other than the friends I see at these clinics. That's why I like coming to them, because there are people like me that don't have any friends either, So it took me adopting to kind of figure that out. So I've really been working on that. And then later, I've been spending a lot of time with business because it's teaching me to be a better manager. It's teaching me to be a better manager, and what that does is it gives me more time with my family. I remember at South Florida we were doing 40s the first or second year, and again I didn't know jack on computers and all that. It really wasn't something that I did in college. I played football and I lifted weights, and that's what I did. So I'm the guy that typed in column A all the 40s, and then I typed in all the 40s in column B, and then instead of doing that little equation, equals average and the two cells and instead of doing all that, I get my little calculator out. I'm like 4.57 plus 4.80 equals boom. And that little task that would have been 5 seconds took me an hour and a half. So when you spend time trying to learn tasks and things that will make your life easier and save time, you're rewarding that back with your family. You got to take advantage of it. A great book, 4-Hour Work Week. If you have not read that book, I recommend you read it. It was one of those books that kind of opened me. It was probably a profound book because it opened me up to some things that I didn't really realize from a management standpoint. Things like outsourcing. So now, instead of fighting with our art department to get a cover made for a manual, I get kind of a rough concept together. I get like 5 or 10 images together. I send it to freaking Siberia. I outsource it. While I'm sleeping, they're working on it through the night, and I got it back in my inbox at 8 a.m. the next morning. And then I turn around, I might make 2 or 3 changes, send it back. I got it by noon, and I'm done with it, and it cost me $5, $10. That is worth it to me than having to sit there and fight with the media guys. So there's some things that you should never sacrifice when it comes to family. Your standards of integrity. So when you're taking these jobs and you get all these different opportunities, it's easy to get caught up in the glitz and the glamour and all those types of things, but there's some things you should definitely not, jeopardize. Your integrity being probably the most important. Your self-respect. Your soul for money. You're going to get offered money. You're going to get offered lots of money to do this job. You can make 100 times more money, running your own thing or doing this or that or the other, but it's what do you truly love? Your health and your well-being. So many times as a strength coach, you're on the floor for 16 hours, but you haven't gotten one training hour in yourself. You talk about eating great for all these athletes. You spend all this time on nutrition and all that, but then you turn around and you're eating donuts and Coke and all those things. So never sacrifice your well-being, then never sacrifice your legacy. That's your family. So if a job conflicts with those things right there, it's not worth it. You got to see the big picture. 9, this is something that a lot of young strength coaches fight with. They don't really see the big picture, and I've had to let coaches go because of this. But you got to understand your role as a strength coach, and you got to put yourself in the shoes of that AD or that head football coach. A guy missing a workout isn't a reason to go fight and lose your job. A guy coming 5 minutes late to a workout, if you go to South Florida, there's a dent in the door where I threw a plate at a kid and missed him and went into the door. And I'm telling you, it's still there. But the kid, what I didn't realize is the kid is, his grandmother had just passed. His mom was talking about committing suicide. He's on the phone with her. He's running to the weight room because he's late and he's worried about it. And what do? I'm a freaking jerk, and I throw a dang plate at him. You know? So in the big picture of life, is that 5 minutes, is that worth it to throw a plate at a kid and maybe damage a relationship for the rest of your life? It's definitely not. So quickly here, tips to become a big picture thinker. You got to study the profession as if you're an outsider. This is something that I've really started doing lately. I've really tried to look at it as if I'm an outsider and I look at strength and conditioning and I talk about working more than 40 hours a week, you go ask your wife, your husband, don't that's not a strength coach. They're like, you're nuts. You don't take 2 weeks vacation. You don't take, you work 80 hours a week. I tell you, you're nuts. Or all these things that we do. So look at it as an outsider and try to find ways to improve it. Find people to talk to that have been doing the job. And probably the most important one is being able to explain what we do. Being able to explain what we do like you would explain it to a 12-year-old. As a young coach, I'd go in there and I'd give you all the jargon, and we're going to do, undulating periodization, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to hypertrophy, and but and to each coach that I've ever worked for, it's Mac. All right, I get it. You're smart. All right, what is it really that we're going to be doing? We're going to work out 4 times a week, and we're going to do, you got to dumb it down. You got to, especially if we're dealing with your athletes, you got to be able to explain it to them so that they understand it, so they'll want to do it. The 10th thing and last thing here is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. All right, there's a lot of strength coaches that have come before us that without their vision and their perseverance, we wouldn't have the jobs that we have. We wouldn't have this conference. You got people that have started this profession when there was no jobs. So and when it was common for people to say, if you lift, you'll be stiff and you'll be worse of an athlete. So they had it 10 times harder than any of us. But yet in this audience, in this room, we got people that'll sit there and they'll complain about there's not enough jobs or this, that, the other. Hey, there's so many untapped markets with strength and conditioning. High school strength and conditioning is an untapped market right now. It's untapped. How many high schools are there in the country? How many high schools and colleges are there in the world? So as strength coaches, we need to stop complaining. We need to start doing. And we need to look at some of the people that came before us and use that as inspiration to be able to go out and challenge these things. But as young coaches, when I'm working with young coaches all the time, they throw their hands up. They get to a wall, and they throw their hands up, and I'm like, what do you mean you're throwing your hands up? Go around it, go over it, run through it. Dig a hole and go underneath it. I don't care what you do, but go through the wall. Find a way, find a job. A lot of those things, I made opportunities. So the best way to get what you want is to give to others. You give others what they want. So ways to be professional and to contribute are, is being professional every time you chance. Being professional doesn't mean knocking the next strength coach because they got the job that you wanted. You got to speak. Scott called me and asked me to speak at this. To be honest with you, I didn't want to do it. I'm in the middle of a season. We're, 22-week season. Now going into a new situation. Driving up there, I had to drive 5 hours to get here when I thought I was going to drive 30 minutes. Didn't want to do it, but the reality is that I need to do it for the growth of our profession. Just like everybody in this room needs to be sharing the information they got, because I promise you didn't get it on your own. Write, conduct research, promote each other, create opportunities, and then continue to learn from those before us and make sure we're seeking them out for counsel. So, getting back to T plus M plus E. Great book, E-Myth Revisited. It's a business book, okay? But in it, they talk about to have success as a business owner, just like to have success as a strength and conditioning coach, you have to, first be a great technician. Everybody in this room is a great technician. They love lifting weights. They love coaching the technique. But I tell you what separates that assistant or that graduate assistant or that intern that loves lifting weights and can teach lifting weights is the second part. You have to be a great manager of time, of resources, of relationships. You have to manage all those things. And the people that can't see the big picture or aren't willing to sacrifice and do those types of things, they fail at going on in this profession because they can't see it. They can't do it. They haven't developed the skills. We went to school to learn how to lift weights and how the body worked. We didn't go to school to learn how to manage things. So oftentimes we fail. And then the third part of that equation, you have to be a great entrepreneur. Entrepreneur meaning you got to be forward thinking. You can't just say, okay, what worked for me at South Florida when we were winning all those games is going to work for me everywhere else. I'm always challenging the things that we do, be it technology, be it programming, whatever it is, I'm trying to always stay current because they're inventing that stuff for a reason. They invented the iPhone for a reason because it makes your life a little bit easier. You know, they're inventing some of this screen capture software because it makes your life a little bit easier. So the thing about this is, to be a great strength coach, you can't just be one of these things. You can't just be a great technician. Or you can't be such an entrepreneur that you're not a good technician. You have to be a combination of all three. So it's T plus M plus E. And find ways to incorporate it in life. So that's the takeaway. I hope that if anything you took away from this presentation, you take away that you want to work on all three of those areas as you go back to your programs. That's my email right there. Like I said, I will send you this presentation. There's a lot on those slides. I know you didn't write it all down, and I don't think I put it in the book, but we'd be happy to do that. That's my website there. I do a lot of things for coaches, you know, on there. It's good information, so if you'd like to check that out, check that out. But like I said, I appreciate your time. I think I'm about over. So I'll be out there. If you're new, shake my hand. If not, shake my hand anyways. Appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.